hard-working maid, already overwhelmed with her daily cleaning tasks in a busy restaurant, suddenly notices a young boy in a wheelchair struggling to pick up something that had fallen from his lap. Without hesitating, she stops everything she's doing to go help him, not knowing anything about who he is. She kneels beside him with kindness, speaks to him gently, and makes sure he's comfortable, treating him with the same care she would show her own children. Completely unaware that the boy's father, a serious and powerful man who rarely shows emotion, is watching the entire scene from across the room. What she doesn't know is that this man is not only the owner of the restaurant, but also a billionaire who is known for being distant and demanding. She has no idea that her small act of compassion is about to change not just the way she's seen, but something far greater than she could ever imagine. Before we continue with this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Oh, and don't forget to comment below where you're watching us from. We love to know that. Richard Hale was a very rich businessman who owned a chain of restaurants called Hale's Bistro. People knew him for being serious and strict. He didn't smile much and didn't like small talk. He always dressed in expensive suits, walked quickly, and expected things to go exactly the way he wanted. Richard lived in a huge, fancy mansion with his son, Lucas Hale. Lucas was only 6 years old and had been through a lot. A car accident had taken away his ability to walk, and even worse, his mother had died in the same crash. Richard, though he loved his son in his own way, was almost never home. He spent most of his time at work or traveling to different cities to check on his restaurants. When he was home, he was often on the phone or locked in his office. Because of this, Lucas was usually left with nurses and therapists. Even though he lived in a beautiful house with many toys, Lucas felt lonely and sad. The people who worked in the house did their best to take care of Lucas. The nurses helped him move around the house, and the therapists came every day to do exercises with him. They encouraged him to smile or play, but it was rare to see any joy on his face. Lucas missed his mother a lot, and he didn't really understand why his father wasn't around. Sometimes he asked the nurse, "Is Daddy coming to eat with me today?" Most of the time, the answer was no. Richard's schedule was always full. He had meetings from early in the morning until late at night. Even when he wasn't working, he said he was busy. On the outside, it looked like Lucas had everything a child could want: expensive toys, a big room, a personal chef. But what he wanted most was someone to talk to, someone who really listened. But the mansion was quiet, and his father's chair at the dining table was usually empty. Richard spent a lot of time in the Hale's Bistro restaurant located in the center of the city. It was the biggest and most popular location of the chain, and Richard liked to eat lunch there almost every day. He didn't go just for the food. He went to make sure everything was working perfectly. The tables had to be clean, the staff had to be polite, and the food had to be served quickly. If something went wrong, Richard would notice right away. He would call the manager over and speak in a firm voice. "This table is wobbly. Fix it, and the music is too loud. Lower it," he would say, without raising his voice. But everyone knew he meant business. The employees were always nervous when Richard was in the room. They knew he expected perfection. Still, the restaurant ran well, and people liked eating there because it looked nice and the food was always good. Even though Richard seemed like he cared only about business, he did think about Lucas often. He just didn't know how to connect with him. After the accident, Richard had thrown himself into his work even more than before. He said it helped him not think about the pain. He never talked about his wife or the crash. When someone tried to bring it up, he changed the subject. Sometimes, while sitting in his office at the restaurant, Richard would take out a small photo of his wife and son, taken before the accident. He looked at it for a few seconds and then put it away. He felt guilty, but didn't know what to do. He told himself that by working hard, he was building a strong future for Lucas. He thought, when he grows up, he'll understand why I worked so much. But Lucas didn't care about the restaurants or the money. He just wanted his dad. Back at the mansion, Lucas often stayed in his room or in the therapy room, where he did stretching and other exercises. Sometimes he sat by the window and watched the garden. He liked the birds and the trees. They made him feel peaceful. But even when he saw something nice, he didn't smile much. He didn't have anyone to share those moments with. One of the nurses, Maria, tried to cheer him up by reading stories or playing games. She once said, "Lucas, would you like to draw a picture for your dad?" Lucas shook his head slowly. "He won't look at it," he replied. Maria didn't know what to say. It was clear that the boy had given up on expecting attention from his father. Every day felt the same. The house was big and beautiful, but to Lucas, it felt more like a hospital than a home. He needed love, but what he got was routine. Even with all the people around him and the successful restaurants under his name, Richard felt alone in a different way. His world was full of meetings, reports, and goals, but none of it brought him real happiness. The staff respected him, but no one was close to him. He kept his emotions locked away, just like his schedule. When he went home, it was often late at night. He would peek into Lucas's room and see him sleeping, covered by soft blankets, breathing quietly. Sometimes he whispered, "Good night, son," but Lucas never heard it. Richard thought about waking him up just to talk, but he didn't. He stood there for a moment, then walked to his room, and the next day he did the same thing again. At lunch, he was back at the city center restaurant, sitting at his usual table, watching the staff work hard to keep everything perfect. Everything looked great, but inside, nothing really felt okay. Angela Brown had only recently started working at Hale's Bistro, one of the busiest restaurants in the city. Her job included taking care of customers at the counter and also helping with cleaning tasks in the back. She arrived early every morning and left late, doing her best to learn everything quickly and avoid making mistakes. She didn't talk much, but she always greeted people with a soft smile and a polite "good morning." Some co-workers noticed how fast and focused she was, moving from one task to another without wasting time. Managers liked her because she didn't complain and followed every instruction exactly. Angela knew that keeping this job was very important. It was hard to get hired, and she didn't want to lose this chance. She needed the money, and even though the job was tiring, she was grateful to have it. To others, she seemed quiet and serious, but respectful. Most people didn't know much about her personal life, and she didn't bring it up. Angela lived in a small two-bedroom apartment in a noisy part of town. She shared the space with her 3 children, Maya, Jordan, and Elise. All of them were still in school, and the apartment was just big enough for the 4 of them. They didn't have a lot of space, but Angela worked hard to keep the place clean and cozy. Each child had chores, and they helped out after school. There was no dishwasher, no microwave, and the furniture was old, but everything was always in order. Angela made sure the kids did their homework, ate healthy meals, and got enough rest. Every night she packed their school lunches and her own work meals. "We can't waste money on food from outside," she would say. In the mornings, she walked for almost 30 minutes to reach the nearest bus stop. She did this to save the little money they had. Even on rainy or cold days, she never took a taxi. They simply couldn't afford it. Her children understood their situation and didn't complain much. Maya, the oldest, helped her younger siblings get ready for school. Jordan liked to draw and sometimes left pictures for his mom to find after work. Elise, the youngest, was full of questions and loved bedtime stories. Angela's schedule was always tight. She woke up before everyone else, got breakfast ready, and made sure the kids left for school on time. Then she rushed to work, where she stayed on her feet almost the whole day. By the time she got home, she was exhausted, but she still helped with homework, cooked dinner, and cleaned up the kitchen. Sometimes her feet hurt so badly that she had to sit on the floor and massage them. But she never showed frustration in front of the kids. She didn't want them to worry. She wanted them to feel safe and loved, no matter how hard life was. To her, they were everything. At the restaurant, Angela's work often went unnoticed by the customers, but the staff began to see how reliable she was. She never arrived late and always finished her tasks. If someone asked for help, she never said no. Once, the dishwasher broke down and Angela stayed late to help clean up by hand, even though no one had asked her. "You don't have to do that," a co-worker told her. "It's okay," Angela replied. "I don't mind." Her attitude made a quiet impression on people. Still, nobody asked about her life outside of work. She didn't share personal details, and during breaks, she usually sat alone and ate the food she brought from home. Her lunch was simple, rice, beans, and maybe some vegetables, but she never complained. She kept her uniform clean and ironed, even though she didn't have a dryer at home. Every small thing she did showed how much she cared about doing things the right way, even if no one was watching. The restaurant was often busy, especially during lunch hours, and things could get stressful. Orders piled up, customers complained, and the noise was constant. But Angela stayed calm. When someone dropped a tray or spilled a drink, she quickly came over to help. If a co-worker was falling behind, she offered to cover part of their duties. "Do you want me to clean that table?" she would ask. She never raised her voice or lost her temper. Managers noticed how valuable she was, but no one really took the time to thank her. Still, Angela didn't expect praise. She told herself, "I just need to keep going, that's all." At night, when the restaurant closed, she helped mop the floors and wipe down the counters. She didn't rush to leave. She stayed until everything was done right. Then she took the long trip back home, often arriving when her children were already in bed. She'd kiss each one softly on the forehead and whisper, "Mommy's here." She believed in kindness even when things were unfair. She taught her children to be polite and honest, and she lived by example. She never spoke badly about others. And even when a customer was rude or a co-worker ignored her, she just kept working. Sometimes she thought about her dreams, how she used to want to be a teacher or own a bakery, but those thoughts didn't last long. Her focus was on her kids and making sure they had what they needed. Every day was a challenge, but Angela faced it with quiet strength. People at the restaurant didn't know about her long walks, the meals she prepared every night, or the stories she read to her children after work. They only saw a silent, hard-working woman who never caused problems. To them, Angela was just part of the team. No one really knew her life. They just knew she worked hard and never complained. It was a busy day at Hale's Bistro, and the restaurant was full of noise from conversations, clinking plates, and footsteps moving quickly across the floor. Around lunchtime, something different happened. Richard Hale, the owner of the restaurant chain, decided to bring his son Lucas to the restaurant for the first time since the car accident. He believed that a change of scenery might help Lucas in some way. "Maybe getting out of the house will be good for him," Richard had told his assistant earlier that morning. A private car stopped in front of the restaurant, and the driver quickly stepped out to open the door. Lucas, now 6 years old and in a special wheelchair, looked around with wide eyes but said nothing. He didn't seem excited. In fact, he looked nervous. The staff inside the restaurant moved fast to prepare space near the usual table Richard liked. They made sure there was enough room for Lucas's wheelchair and kept everything clean and quiet, as Richard liked. As they entered, people in the restaurant turned their heads but tried not to stare. Most employees recognized Richard immediately and knew that the child with him must be his son. Some had heard about the accident and whispered quietly to each other when they thought no one was listening. "That must be Lucas," one waitress said to another in the kitchen. "Poor kid." Richard nodded to a few workers but didn't stop to talk. He walked straight to a table near the back where 2 managers were already waiting. "Let's begin," he said, pulling out a chair for himself. Lucas was placed a bit farther from the group at a smaller table that had been prepared just for him. The table had a glass of water, a napkin, and a small menu in case he wanted to order something. Lucas didn't touch anything. He just sat quietly in his wheelchair, holding onto the armrests, looking around the room without making eye contact. Lucas's eyes moved slowly from person to person. He saw the waiters rushing from table to table, the kitchen doors swinging open and closed, and customers talking and laughing. But everything felt distant to him. He sat stiffly, his small shoulders raised like he was trying to hide. His hands stayed still on his lap, and he barely moved. One of the waitresses passed by and gave him a warm smile, but Lucas didn't smile back. He looked down quickly. He wasn't used to being around so many people. At home, things were quiet and controlled. Here, even though the restaurant was trying to stay calm because of Richard's presence, it was still loud and full of movement. Lucas didn't ask for anything, and no one spoke directly to him. He watched his father from a distance. Richard was talking about business numbers and monthly reports. Lucas didn't understand what was being said, but he knew his father looked serious, just like always. The managers sitting with Richard tried to stay focused during the meeting, but they kept glancing over at Lucas. It wasn't every day that the owner brought his son to the restaurant. "We've had a 12% increase in lunch traffic this month," one of them said, pointing to a printed report. Richard nodded, then asked about customer satisfaction scores. He kept his tone low and firm. The restaurant workers nearby lowered their voices and made sure everything stayed perfect. Glasses were filled before they were empty. Plates were delivered quickly and quietly. One server, while cleaning a table, paused for a moment and looked over at Lucas, then quickly returned to work. The atmosphere was careful and respectful. Everyone understood that Richard expected professionalism at all times, but today felt different. There was a child present, and not just any child, his child. Even though Lucas wasn't speaking or interacting, his presence changed the way people acted. Despite the quiet around him, Lucas could feel that people were watching. He didn't like being the center of attention. He shifted a little in his wheelchair, trying to get comfortable. A man at a nearby table smiled and gave a small wave. Lucas looked at him, then looked away. He felt out of place, like he didn't belong there. Back at home, he had his routine, his room, his nurses. Here, everything was unfamiliar. He didn't even know what to order, so he didn't ask for anything. One of the servers came over carefully and asked, "Would you like something to drink, sweetheart?" Lucas looked at her, shook his head and whispered, "No, thank you." The server nodded and backed away politely. Meanwhile, Richard continued his conversation, occasionally glancing at his son but not getting up. He thought Lucas needed this. He thought just being here might help him feel normal again. But Lucas didn't feel normal. He felt small and unsure. The meeting lasted a little longer, and when it was finally done, Richard stood up and walked over to Lucas. "Are you okay?" he asked. Lucas nodded without speaking. "Let's go," Richard said, placing his hand gently on the back of the wheelchair. The driver, who had been waiting nearby, stepped in to assist. Everyone in the restaurant watched silently as they prepared to leave. Workers stood straight, customers stayed quiet, and people moved aside respectfully. The special table was quickly cleared as soon as they left. As they exited the restaurant, the noise returned to normal, but the moment stayed with those who had seen it. It was rare to see Richard Hale outside of work mode, and even rarer to see him with his son. Some of the staff talked quietly about it afterward. "He looked so fragile," one person said. "Yeah," another replied, "but at least he came out today." That quiet moment faded, but no one forgot it easily. Angela was setting a table near the back of the restaurant, placing clean silverware and folding napkins, when she noticed something out of the corner of her eye. She saw Lucas Hale, seated quietly in his wheelchair, struggling to reach a toy that had fallen from his lap. The small plastic figure had slipped onto the floor, just out of his reach. Lucas leaned forward a little, trying to stretch his arm down, but he couldn't get to it. Angela paused what she was doing right away. She looked around for a moment, made sure no one urgently needed her, and then walked slowly toward Lucas. She didn't want to startle him. When she got close, she bent down a little and said gently, "Do you want me to help you with that?" Lucas looked up at her, his face unsure at first. But then he gave her a small, shy nod. Angela smiled softly, picked up the toy from the floor, and placed it carefully in his hands. As soon as Lucas had the toy back, he looked at it, then looked at Angela. Something in his expression changed, and for the first time since arriving at the restaurant, he seemed to relax a little. "Thank you," he said in a quiet voice. Angela nodded and smiled again. "You're welcome," she replied. Then instead of walking away, she stayed. She crouched down to his eye level and asked, "Are you comfortable? Do you want me to fix your cushion a bit?" Lucas looked down at the seat and shrugged. "It's a little bumpy," he admitted. Angela gently adjusted the pillow behind his back and made sure the footrests on the wheelchair were set correctly. "There," she said softly, "that should feel better." Lucas gave her a small smile, and this time it lasted a little longer. Angela noticed the way he gripped the toy more confidently now. She sat beside him on her knees, not rushing, just being there, giving him her full attention without pressure. Lucas glanced around to see if anyone was watching, then turned back to Angela and asked, "Do you work here every day?" Angela nodded. "Most days, yes. I help keep things clean and sometimes work at the front counter." Lucas nodded too. "I haven't been here since the accident," he said, looking down at his toy again. Angela didn't ask any questions. She just listened. "I used to come with my mom," he added softly. Angela looked at him gently and said, "I bet she really liked coming here with you." Lucas nodded. "She liked the chocolate cake," he said. "Good choice," Angela replied, smiling. "That one's really popular." Lucas chuckled a little, just a tiny sound, but it was there. Angela kept her tone calm and kind. She didn't treat him like someone different. She didn't talk to him like he was fragile. She just treated him like a boy who wanted to talk, and that made all the difference. Nearby, a few customers who had been quietly eating looked over and noticed the interaction. They didn't say anything, but they watched with interest. It wasn't every day that someone got to see Richard Hale's son speak with someone like that. Most people in the restaurant were careful not to draw attention to the family out of respect. But this moment was different. Angela wasn't doing anything for show. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was just being kind. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a clean napkin to wipe a small smudge on Lucas's hand. "There we go," she said. Lucas didn't pull away. He let her help. A customer sitting 2 tables away smiled and whispered to a friend, "She's good with him." The friend nodded in agreement. Still, the restaurant remained quiet and respectful, as always when Richard was present. But this small moment between Angela and Lucas added something warmer to the air. On the other side of the dining room, Richard was still seated at his usual table, finishing the last part of his conversation with the managers. His voice had gone quiet, and he was no longer looking at the reports in front of him. Instead, he was watching Angela and Lucas. He didn't interrupt them. He didn't walk over, but he saw everything. He saw how Angela crouched beside his son without hesitation. He saw how Lucas looked more relaxed than he had all morning. There was no fear or stiffness in the boy's posture now, just calm and quiet conversation. Richard noticed how naturally Angela spoke to him. No signs of pity, no forced smile, just simple attention and kindness. Richard didn't smile, but his expression changed slightly. He leaned back in his chair and said nothing, just watching. For someone like him, who rarely allowed feelings to show, even that quiet pause meant something. Angela stayed with Lucas for a few more minutes, making sure he was comfortable and still holding his toy. She didn't rush to leave or check her watch. She seemed content, just being there for him. Eventually, she stood up and said, "If you need anything, I'm not far." Lucas nodded. "Okay." Angela gave him one last smile, then walked slowly back to the table she had been setting earlier. She picked up the napkins again and returned to work like nothing unusual had happened. Lucas watched her go, still holding his toy, but now with a more peaceful expression on his face. Around them, the restaurant continued to run as usual. Waiters moved between tables, dishes clattered in the kitchen, and customers returned to their meals. But those who had seen the moment between Angela and Lucas remembered it, and across the room, Richard sat in silence, looking at the woman who had just shown his son something that he hadn't seen in a long time: comfort, care, and connection. During the week, something began to change at the restaurant. Every time Lucas came in with his father, he started looking around as soon as he entered, his eyes searching the room until they found Angela. As soon as he spotted her, a small smile would appear on his face. He didn't wait for his father to tell him what to do. He asked, "Is Angela here today?" Sometimes he asked the driver before even getting out of the car. Angela didn't treat him like someone who needed pity. She listened to him, answered his questions, and made him feel comfortable. So it became normal for her to spend a few minutes with him whenever he was there. She would straighten his cushion, ask if he wanted anything, and chat with him in a friendly, calm way. "Did you draw something new?" she once asked him, and Lucas proudly pulled out a folded paper from his backpack. He had drawn her. Angela smiled and said, "I love it, thank you." Lucas talked more and smiled more when she was around. He waited for her to approach and sometimes even asked for her if she wasn't nearby. "Where's Angela?" he once asked a server, looking worried when he didn't see her right away. Word started to spread among the staff. At first, it was just small comments. Some said it was nice to see Lucas open up, but then the tone started to shift. A few co-workers began whispering about how much attention Angela was giving the owner's son. They said things like, "She's always next to him, and she's really trying hard to be noticed." One worker even joked, "Maybe she thinks being nice to the kid will get her promoted." Most of the remarks happened quietly, behind Angela's back. She was too focused on her job and on Lucas to notice the change in attitude from the others. One employee, Melissa, was the most vocal about her suspicions. She often worked near Angela and started making passive-aggressive comments during their shifts. "It's funny how some people suddenly become extra caring when the boss's son is around," she said loudly one afternoon while folding napkins. Another time she muttered, "Some people will do anything to climb the ladder." Angela didn't respond. She didn't know Melissa was talking about her at first, but soon it became clear. Melissa even went as far as to suggest to a few co-workers that Angela was planning something. "Watch, she'll probably get special hours soon," she said, rolling her eyes. The comments made others uncomfortable, but no one stepped in. The team started to look at Angela differently. Her honest actions were now seen by some as fake or strategic. What had once been seen as kindness was now being misinterpreted as ambition, simply because she was getting close to someone important. Eventually, some of those whispers made their way to the management team. A few supervisors noticed the attention Lucas was giving Angela and started to discuss it quietly in their office. One of them said, "It's probably nothing, but we should keep an eye on it." Another added, "It just looks unusual." One day, while Richard was reviewing the weekly reports in his office, a manager casually mentioned the situation. "Lucas seems to have taken a liking to one of the cleaning staff," he said. "Angela. She's been spending a lot of time with him." The comment was vague, but it made Richard pause. He didn't react right away, but later he began to think about it more. He remembered Lucas smiling at her, laughing even. That was rare. Still, the idea that someone might be using his son made him feel uneasy. "I need to be careful," he thought. He didn't want anyone trying to get close to his family for the wrong reasons. Richard began to watch more closely during his visits. He kept one eye on his son and the other on Angela. He paid attention to her tone of voice, her body language, and how she acted when she thought no one was watching. He was looking for signs that she was pretending, that she had a hidden goal. But what he saw didn't match the rumors. Angela still spoke to Lucas the same way. She didn't act different when Richard was nearby. She didn't brag or act important. She just continued doing her job, then knelt beside Lucas, fixed his pillow, listened to his stories, and smiled when he shared something. Nothing about her behavior seemed fake. Still, the doubt stayed in Richard's mind. He had built his business by being cautious, by questioning everything. And now, even though he had seen genuine happiness in Lucas's face, a part of him couldn't help but wonder, what if the others are right? She continued helping Lucas whenever he was there. She gave him her time, her patience, and her kindness. She didn't do it for praise or attention. She did it because she cared. But the atmosphere in the restaurant had changed. She could feel it. Some co-workers stopped greeting her like before. Others gave her short replies or avoided eye contact. When she walked through the dining area, she noticed the stares. People looked at her, then looked away quickly. She didn't know why. She thought maybe she had made a mistake somewhere or that people were just stressed. But she stayed quiet and kept working the same way she always had. Her focus stayed on her tasks and on Lucas. She didn't understand that her sincere kindness was now being judged by others. All she knew was that something around her no longer felt the same. Melissa had finally decided she had enough of watching Angela get attention, especially from Lucas and indirectly from Richard. She became more focused on proving that Angela wasn't as innocent as she seemed. Melissa started observing her closely, taking mental notes and even writing things down in a small notebook she kept in her apron pocket. She watched the times Angela spoke with Lucas, how long those conversations lasted, and how often she walked away from her cleaning tasks. "She's always chatting with him," Melissa whispered to a server one afternoon. "Watch, she's using him to skip work." The comment spread quickly. Within a few days, more workers had joined in the gossip. "Maybe she wants a raise," someone said. Another replied, "Or maybe she's trying to become a nanny or something." Melissa kept feeding the fire. She made sure to bring up Angela's name whenever people complained about how much work they had. "Must be nice to have time to sit and talk while the rest of us are running around," she said sarcastically. The gossip around Angela got worse each day. Melissa continued to point out every moment Angela wasn't cleaning or organizing something. If she stopped to talk to Lucas, even for a minute, Melissa made sure someone saw it. She would say things like, "There she goes again," or "Guess the rules don't apply to everyone." The worst part was that some people started believing it. A few co-workers who used to be friendly began acting distant. They didn't ask her to help with tasks like they used to. They gave her short answers and cold looks. Angela noticed, but she didn't understand why. She still showed up early, did her job, and treated everyone with respect. She didn't stop being kind to Lucas either, even though the tension around her was growing. She thought maybe people were just tired or stressed. She had no idea Melissa was behind the change. But Melissa was determined to make her look bad, and soon she found a chance. One afternoon, Melissa went directly to the head manager of the restaurant. She stood near his office and waited until he was free. "I think you should know something," she said in a serious tone. "Angela has been using her work hours to sit and talk with Mr. Hale's son. I've seen her several times leaving her tasks unfinished. Yesterday, she left 3 tables dirty for almost an hour." The manager raised his eyebrows. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Positive," Melissa replied. "I don't want to cause trouble, but it's not fair to the rest of us." The manager didn't say much, but later that day, he scheduled a surprise check. He told a supervisor to walk the floor during Angela's shift without warning. He wanted to see things for himself. When the supervisor did the round, they found that a section of the restaurant still had several tables with dirty plates and cups. Melissa was quick to point it out. "See, I told you," she whispered loud enough for others to hear. What Melissa didn't mention was the real reason Angela had paused her duties. Minutes earlier, an elderly customer had stood up too quickly from his chair and almost lost his balance. Angela had rushed over without thinking twice. "Sir, are you okay?" she asked, holding his arm gently to steady him. The man nodded, but looked dizzy. Angela helped him sit back down and brought him a glass of water. She stayed with him for a few minutes, making sure he was all right before returning to her work. That short break was enough for the tables nearby to start piling up with used dishes. It hadn't been long, but it was enough time to create the image that she was falling behind. When the supervisor pointed out the messy section, Angela explained what happened. "A man almost fell. I had to help him," she said calmly. But the supervisor only shook their head. "You still need to keep up with your area," they said. Melissa stood nearby, watching silently. Angela was called into the office at the end of her shift. The manager had her sit down across from him and reviewed the incident. "We've received concerns about how you're managing your time," he said. "Today you were found with several incomplete tasks. This can't continue." Angela was stunned. She tried to explain. "The man needed help. I couldn't just ignore him," she said, her voice steady but hurt. "I always finish my work. I never leave things behind unless there's a good reason." But the manager seemed unmoved. "You're being given a formal warning. Next time, report such incidents immediately to a supervisor." Angela's face fell. She felt confused and embarrassed. She had only done what felt right, and now she was being punished for it. "I wasn't being careless," she added softly, but it was too late. The warning was already written down. She signed the paper with trembling hands, holding back the frustration building inside her. When she walked back into the staff area, the silence was heavy. A few people looked at her, then looked away quickly. No one spoke. Melissa leaned against the counter with a smug look on her face. Angela avoided her gaze. She didn't know the full truth of what was going on, but she could feel the shift clearly now. Things weren't the same. The people she worked beside every day now saw her differently. Not long ago, she was respected for being quiet, efficient, and helpful. Now she was being treated like a problem. The formal warning weighed on her like a heavy stone. She kept thinking about Lucas, how he smiled when he saw her, how he opened up in a way he didn't with others. That was never about gaining favors. She had just wanted to be kind to a child who needed it. But kindness hadn't protected her from rumors and judgment. She returned to her duties in silence, feeling humiliated and deeply misunderstood. Richard had started to distance himself from the situation involving Angela. After receiving formal reports and hearing repeated comments from his management team, he chose to step back emotionally. He didn't speak to Angela, didn't ask her side of the story, and instead watched everything from afar. He believed the written complaints, the formal warnings, and the quiet suggestions from people he trusted. Angela, once seen as someone kind to his son, now appeared to him as someone possibly trying to take advantage. Richard didn't show his doubts openly, but his attitude changed. He didn't make eye contact with her anymore. He avoided being present when she interacted with Lucas. Lucas noticed this change almost immediately. He felt it in the air, in the way his father looked away during the moments that used to make him smile. The visits to the restaurant started to feel different. Lucas no longer asked if Angela was working. He waited quietly, unsure if it was still okay to be happy around her. Lucas had become more withdrawn. He still came to the restaurant with his father, still sat in his usual spot, but he talked less and didn't smile as much. His toy, a small plastic figure he always carried, became more important to him. He held it tightly, as if it gave him comfort when things around him felt strange. One afternoon, while his father was in a meeting with managers, Lucas spotted Angela passing by. His eyes lit up for a second, and he raised his hand gently. "Hi, Angela," he said, his voice soft but hopeful. Before she could respond, Melissa stepped in between them. "She's busy right now," Melissa said firmly. "She has work to do, and we can't have distractions, okay?" Her tone was sweet on the surface, but firm underneath. Lucas froze. His hand dropped, and he looked down. He hugged his toy to his chest and stayed quiet. He didn't argue. He didn't call out again. He just sat still, feeling rejected and confused. Angela had seen the moment from a short distance. She noticed Lucas's face and how quickly his smile disappeared. His whole posture changed. He looked smaller, sadder. She knew that something had happened. She waited a few minutes, making sure her tasks were caught up, then slowly walked toward him during a quieter moment. She knelt beside his wheelchair and said softly, "It's okay, Lucas. I can talk to you. I always have time for you." Lucas looked at her, his eyes sad but thankful. "Melissa said I shouldn't bother you," he whispered. Angela shook her head gently. "You're never a bother," she said. "Not to me." Lucas nodded, holding his toy tighter. They didn't talk much more, but that little bit of comfort helped. Angela gave him a small smile and touched his arm gently before getting back to work. She didn't know that someone had seen their short exchange, but across the room, a manager had been watching the entire thing and took note immediately. Later that day, Angela was called into the administrative office. The tone was serious from the start. The manager sat behind the desk with a folder in front of him. "Angela, we need to talk," he said without smiling. Angela sat down slowly, already sensing it wouldn't be a good conversation. "We've had another report," he continued. "You were seen leaving your duties again to speak with Mr. Hale's son." Angela looked surprised. "I just spoke to him for a minute," she said. "He was upset. I didn't want to ignore him." The manager raised his hand to stop her. "We've talked about this before. This behavior is starting to look like a pattern. Some people think you're trying to create a connection with the boy for your own gain." Angela blinked. "That's not true," she said quietly. "I've always been kind to him. That's all." The manager leaned forward. "If it happens again, we will have to consider termination. This is your final warning." She wanted to defend herself more, to explain that she had never done anything wrong, but she could see from the expression on the manager's face that nothing she said would change his mind. The decision had already been made. "I'm just doing my job," she said finally. "And I've never treated Lucas with anything but respect." The manager didn't respond right away. He simply closed the folder and said, "Make sure it doesn't happen again." Angela stood up, holding her hands together to keep them from shaking. She left the room quietly and returned to the kitchen area, where the same cold looks and awkward silence greeted her. The warmth she used to feel at work was gone. The other workers didn't speak. Melissa passed by her with a look of victory. Angela didn't say a word. She just went back to her station and picked up a clean towel, trying to keep herself busy and hide how broken she felt inside. From that moment, everything felt heavier for Angela. Every task, every step across the restaurant floor was filled with tension. She didn't feel free to smile or speak unless it was absolutely necessary. Even when she saw Lucas looking around for her, she kept her distance. She didn't want to risk another warning. Lucas, sitting in his chair, noticed that she didn't come over anymore. He watched her quietly, hoping maybe she would wave or smile, but she didn't. He looked down at his toy, holding it tight, and didn't say a word. Richard, busy with his own thoughts and guided by what he had been told, didn't see the damage that was unfolding between them. He thought he was protecting his son, but all he was doing was taking away the one connection that had brought Lucas a little light during his hardest days. Angela continued her shift, holding back her emotions, and trying to understand how something so genuine had turned into something so painful. Even though Angela felt shaken and deeply hurt by everything that had happened, she decided she wasn't going to accept the injustice quietly. She had worked too hard to let lies and jealousy ruin everything. After a few nights thinking alone in her small kitchen, she came up with a plan. She started to remember the customers who had seen her helping others, especially the elderly man she assisted the day she was accused of neglecting her duties. She decided to talk to him. One morning, before her shift, Angela walked to the small bookstore where she had seen him before. She explained what had happened and how her actions were misunderstood. The old man listened patiently, nodding his head. "I remember you helped me. I almost fell," he said. "You didn't care about anything else but making sure I was okay." Angela asked if he would be willing to speak to Richard himself. The man agreed. "I don't like seeing good people punished for doing the right thing," he told her. Angela returned to work feeling nervous but a little more hopeful. She told the head manager that a customer wanted to speak to Richard directly. At first, the manager hesitated, but Angela insisted politely. "It's important," she said. "He has something to say." A date was set. On that morning, Angela kept to her usual tasks, avoiding eye contact with co-workers. Lucas was in the restaurant that day, sitting in his usual spot with his toy in hand. He didn't smile like he used to. He just sat there quietly, watching the people move around. When the old man arrived, a host escorted him to the front of the restaurant. Richard was called from his office. He came out calmly, as always, not expecting much. Angela stood nearby, her hands behind her back. The old man stepped forward. "Mr. Hale, my name is Thomas," he said. "I'm here because I believe something unfair happened to your employee, Angela. I saw everything with my own eyes." The man continued, "That day I got dizzy. I stood up too fast and almost collapsed. Angela dropped everything and helped me sit down again. She didn't know who I was. She just reacted. She didn't leave her post to waste time. She helped a customer in need." He spoke slowly, but clearly. "She even brought me water and stayed nearby to be sure I was okay. That's not someone trying to take advantage. That's someone doing the right thing." The restaurant was unusually quiet. A few workers paused what they were doing to listen. Lucas looked at the man, then turned his eyes to his father, waiting to see how he would respond. Richard didn't interrupt. He nodded slowly, clearly thinking. Before he could speak, Melissa, who had been standing nearby, suddenly stepped forward. "Excuse me," she said loudly, "but how do we know this isn't something Angela planned? Maybe she told him what to say." She didn't say anything yet. The old man looked at Melissa and frowned. "Young lady," he said, "I've lived a long time. I don't take orders from anyone, and I certainly don't lie for strangers. I came here because it was the right thing to do." Melissa opened her mouth to respond, but at that moment, another voice joined in. A woman sitting at a nearby table raised her hand. "I was here that day too," she said. "I saw it happen. She's telling the truth. That employee didn't hesitate for a second. She helped the man before anyone else noticed." A second woman, seated across from her, nodded. "Yes, we both saw it. She handled the situation with care." Now more eyes were turning toward Melissa. She suddenly looked uncomfortable, shifting from one foot to the other. Her confident expression faded. She had no response to the extra witnesses, and her earlier words began to sound weak and unfounded. Richard looked around the room, then back at Melissa. His expression didn't change much, but his silence spoke volumes. He turned to Angela and said, "Is this true? You helped without reporting it?" Angela nodded. "Yes, sir. I didn't think about writing it up. I just saw someone who needed help." Richard looked at her for a moment, then glanced at Lucas, who was still holding his toy and watching closely. Richard turned back to the elderly man and said, "Thank you for coming." The man simply nodded and walked out slowly, his job done. Melissa stepped back, realizing she had lost control of the situation. Whispers began to fill the room. Some co-workers who had doubted Angela were now questioning everything they had heard. Angela stood tall but calm. She wasn't smug. She wasn't angry. She just felt relieved that someone had finally believed her, that the truth was spoken out loud, not twisted into rumors or false accusations like before. Melissa didn't say anything else. She walked away quietly, trying to avoid the stares that followed her. The tension in the restaurant started to shift. The same people who once looked at Angela with suspicion now looked at her differently. A few even looked guilty. The manager who had threatened her job earlier came out from the back office but said nothing, clearly unsure of what to do next. Angela didn't gloat or try to make anyone feel bad. She simply returned to her duties, wiping down a nearby counter as if it were just another day. Lucas, still watching from his chair, finally smiled. For the first time in days, he felt that everything might be okay again. Angela looked at him from across the room and gave him a small wave. He waved back, clutching his toy like always. Richard stood still, taking in everything that had happened, realizing he had made assumptions too quickly. The truth had been right in front of him, and now he couldn't ignore it. Richard stood in his office, replaying the events from the day before in his mind. He had watched the elderly customer speak with honesty and conviction. He had heard the voices of two other women who backed up Angela's actions without hesitation. And he had seen Melissa fall silent under the weight of truth. For the first time in weeks, he saw clearly how badly things had gone. He had relied too much on reports and rumors, and not enough on what he saw with his own eyes. He realized how unfair he had been to Angela. She had been judged, warned, and humiliated for doing something good, something kind. That morning, Richard called her to his office. Angela walked in slowly, nervous. "Angela," he said calmly, "I want to apologize. I made a mistake. I believed things that weren't true, and I see now the damage that caused." Angela blinked in surprise. It was the first time she had heard those words from him. "Thank you," she said quietly. As they stood in the office, the door opened slightly. Lucas, holding his toy like he always did, stepped in. He had been waiting just outside. When he saw Angela, his face lit up. He walked slowly, with effort, across the room and reached for her hand. "I'm happy when you're here," he said, his voice soft but clear. Angela knelt down and took his hand in hers. "I'm happy to see you too," she replied, her voice shaking a little. Richard watched the moment closely. It wasn't dramatic or loud, but it was powerful. His son, who had been so quiet and withdrawn for months, was finally opening up. And it wasn't to him or to the nurses at home, it was to Angela. That small connection, so natural and honest, meant more than anything else. Richard felt something shift inside him. He had built his life on structure, success, and control. But in that moment, he saw the value of something simpler: trust. Richard cleared his throat and looked at Angela seriously. "Lucas feels safe with you. I can see that now," he said. "You've treated him with kindness without expecting anything in return." Angela nodded slowly, not sure what else to say. "I want to make you a formal offer," Richard continued. "I'd like you to work as Lucas's caregiver, full-time. A stable position with a higher salary, full benefits, and support for your children." Angela's eyes widened and her hand covered her mouth. "You mean, really?" she asked. "Yes," Richard said. "You've already done the job without being asked. And you've done it better than anyone else could have." Angela's eyes filled with tears. "This would change everything for us," she whispered. "It's yours, if you want it," Richard said simply. Angela nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Then she looked at Lucas and smiled. "Yes, I accept." Lucas hugged her, and she wrapped her arms around him tightly. For the first time in a long while, she felt hope. Meanwhile, the restaurant was going through its own moment of reckoning. The management team had launched a formal investigation into the recent accusations and internal behavior. After reviewing complaints, testimonies, and work records, it became clear that Melissa had been the source of the false accusations against Angela. Several co-workers admitted that she had made inappropriate comments and encouraged gossip. She had intentionally created division among the team. When the final report was ready, Richard reviewed it himself. The evidence was undeniable. Melissa was called into the office and told the decision. Her contract was terminated effective immediately. She tried to argue, but her words fell flat. "You created an unhealthy environment," the manager said. "That's not tolerated here." As she left, the atmosphere in the restaurant changed. Her departure sent a clear message. This place would no longer allow lies and manipulation. People started whispering, but this time the tone was different. Some felt relief, others felt guilty for going along with the rumors too easily. In the days that followed, the team began to shift. Without Melissa spreading negativity, things felt calmer. Some employees who had once given Angela cold looks now watched her with quiet respect. A few even approached her during breaks to apologize. One server said, "I'm sorry I didn't say anything. I should have." Angela didn't hold grudges. She simply nodded and replied, "Thank you. That means a lot." The staff began to reflect on how quickly they had judged someone without knowing the full story. Managers held a meeting about workplace behavior, respect, and fairness. Policies were reviewed, and a message was made clear. Every worker had value, and false accusations would not be taken lightly. The culture inside the restaurant began to heal. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. People started working together again, communicating more, helping each other without hesitation. Angela, now in a new role, carried herself with quiet confidence. She had gone through humiliation, but she had stood tall. And now she was seen for who she truly was. Angela's life changed, not just inside the restaurant, but at home too. With her new position, she no longer had to stretch every penny to feed her children. She bought proper school supplies for Maya, new shoes for Jordan, and a warm jacket for Elise. They didn't have to skip meals, and Angela no longer had to walk long distances just to save on bus fare. More than the money, what mattered most was the sense of stability. She no longer feared losing her job for reasons beyond her control. She had security. At work, she focused on Lucas with even more care. She helped him with therapy exercises, read to him, and played games that made him laugh. Lucas began smiling more often. He looked forward to coming to the restaurant, knowing that Angela would be there. Richard watched this transformation quietly. He saw how his son grew stronger and more expressive under Angela's care. And every time he looked at her now, he saw not a worker, but someone who had made all the difference. Angela began her new role working directly with Lucas, and everything in her daily life started to feel different. Instead of running between tables with cleaning supplies and feeling the pressure of judgmental stares, she now spent her hours focused on one important goal: helping Lucas. She arrived early every morning and met with the physical therapists to review the day's schedule. She learned how to support him during his stretching sessions, how to help with mobility exercises, and how to encourage him without pushing too hard. "You're doing great today, Lucas," she would say, even when he was frustrated. Her calm voice made him try again. Lucas trusted her, and with each passing day, he smiled more, talked more, and slowly regained interest in the therapy he had once ignored. They worked not only in the clinic space, but also outside, sometimes just walking slowly through the garden. Angela turned simple moments into progress. She reminded him gently, every small step is still a step forward. Richard had invited Angela and her kids to a weekend lunch at the mansion. At first, Angela hesitated, but she accepted. When Maya, Jordan, and Elise met Lucas, they were polite but curious. Lucas was quiet at first, unsure of what to say, but Jordan broke the silence by showing him a small robot toy. "Want to try it?" he asked. Lucas nodded. From that moment, the connection grew naturally. Maya helped read stories to Lucas. Elise made him laugh with silly jokes, and soon the children blended together as if they'd known each other for years. Angela watched this with quiet joy. It warmed her heart to see her kids forming a friendship with Lucas. Lucas began to look forward to their visits. "Are Maya and Jordan coming today?" he'd ask. Angela would smile and say, "Maybe, let's finish your exercises first." The simple friendship between the children made the house feel full of life. Richard couldn't help but notice the changes. His son, who used to sit in silence, was now talking, laughing and trying. Richard, who had spent years focused on business and distant from his own emotions, began to see things differently. He saw how Angela handled difficult moments with calm and patience. If Lucas had a bad day or refused to do a task, Angela didn't force him. She waited, talked to him, found another way. "Let's just sit for a bit," she'd say. Or, "How about we try again in 10 minutes?" Her way wasn't about control, it was about connection. Richard started spending more time at home, joining short walks or meals, asking questions about Lucas's therapy. He even sat in during a few sessions to watch. Angela didn't treat him like a boss anymore. She treated him like a father trying to learn. Over time, he started including Angela and her children in outings, picnics, museum visits, even a small trip to the park. The boundaries between employee and family began to blur. Wanting to do more, Richard took another step. He offered to help Angela's children enroll in better schools. "They deserve it," he said. "They're bright and they should have the same chances as anyone else." At first, Angela was overwhelmed. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You don't have to," Richard replied. "Just keep being who you are." With his help, Maya started attending a school with a strong science program. Jordan joined an art club, and Elise had access to better reading materials. Angela continued working with Lucas, but now with even more peace of mind. At home, her kids were happier, and their future seemed clearer. Lucas, too, showed signs of confidence returning. He no longer resisted therapy sessions. He asked questions, set small goals, and even joked with the therapists. "I think I can do more reps today," he said one afternoon. His laughter became more common, and his motivation grew. Angela's steady support and presence had made the difference no one else could. Word about Angela's story slowly spread, first among the staff, then to the broader community. People who once saw her only as a cleaning worker now spoke of her with respect. "She turned everything around," one manager said. "She never gave up." The restaurant staff treated her differently now, no longer with suspicion, but with admiration. Customers who had seen her kindness before now understood the full picture. Some even asked to meet her. Richard made sure she was recognized at a staff meeting. "She showed us what strength really looks like," he said. Outside the restaurant, Angela was invited to speak at a school event about courage and kindness. She stood nervously at the front of the room but spoke with honesty. "Sometimes people will judge you before they know you, but your actions speak louder than rumors." Her words stuck with many people, Annie. She had gone from being quietly ignored to becoming a symbol of dignity, strength, and integrity, and she had done it without changing who she was. Angela didn't forget how hard the journey had been, but she didn't carry bitterness with her. She focused on the present, the progress Lucas was making, the smiles on her children's faces, the peace she felt knowing her work was finally respected. Lucas now greeted her with open arms each morning. "What are we doing today?" he'd ask eagerly. She would smile and say, "Let's see what we can accomplish together." The mansion, once quiet and cold, now felt more alive. The sound of children playing, the laughter from shared meals, and the quiet teamwork between Angela and Richard gave the place new meaning. Richard, too, continued to grow. He spent more time listening and less time controlling. He no longer saw vulnerability as weakness. Instead, he saw how connection, honesty, and patience could build something lasting. Angela had entered his life as an employee, but over time, she had become something more. Her story had not just changed one boy's life, it had changed a family, and it all started with kindness. Finally, we've reached the end of this story. I'm extremely happy that you've made it this far. Thank you very much for watching. Comment below what you thought and what was the best or worst part. Don't forget to subscribe. Until next time.